Yesterday we were out here painting in a short sleeve shirt and anticipating getting, maybe even getting up to the flying field with one of the old planes. It ain't gonna happen, thanks to Mother Nature. Now, one thing I learned from a lifetime of living in this area of the country is you always plan your work around the weather. In this case, we were very lucky. We got that first coat of clear on, a couple extra coats over the lettering and over the where the paint lines end, and now it's all sitting up by the heating vent while we work on other projects. One by one, as the parts are up by the heating vent, we can take them down, move them around so that each one of them gets a little chance to be up by the heating vent. Always a good idea to let that first coat, let it really get nice and hard before you attack it with sandpaper. And it's just sitting there right by that heating vent, boy, that. And we're going to give it an extra day up by the heating vent before we come back and work on it. We have other projects to work on. Now, before we go on to doing any of the work with the actual clear while that first coat is drying out, I want to give you some food for thought. Now, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, here's your model. And if you were to take and put an equal amount of clear over the whole plane, top and bottom, what I think would happen is, and this is one of the things that I think a lot of people miss the boat on, or even if they don't miss the boat, it's unnecessary what they do. In other words, what happens is the whole plane would be one flat surface. Let's say there was no trim on a plane, and you could then put on, in our case, a coat of clear, let it dry a little bit, or maybe two coats, sand it, and put that third coat of clear on. Everything would be fine. If that's what you were dealing with, everything would be fine. But that's not what you're dealing with. In a typical plane, let's just, for the sake of argument, and if you follow through with me, I think this will save you some real time. It'll save time and weight both. There's certain areas of the plane, the top should have more than the bottom. So you want to segregate it. The reason is, most people, sometimes not even in appearance judging, they're going to see the top. So I would think, the way I've done it in the past is I've tried to put about 2/3 of the material, and this doesn't have to be exact, and 1/3 on the bottom. That alone, if you do nothing else to improve your finishing, this gives you, it actually saves you about 1/3 of the weight of the finish, which in most cases is about an ounce. Maybe an ounce and a half on a person who finishes heavier. But even this can be improved upon. Now, I've done this so many times that I kind of just take it for granted that everybody knows this, but every once in a while somebody, like Mike Kajeski's been over here working on his Cardinal, and he'll ask me a question, and I say, geez, doesn't everybody do that? Well, everybody doesn't do that. And here's what it boils down to, is on finishing like what we have, we don't have a flat surface. We haven't sanded that clear yet, but everywhere that we have lettering, there's a little, either from the two tape joints, or if you paint over your trim, you're basically, the base of your finish looks like this, where one color ends and the other one begins. This is what we have on our model, because we don't have double paint except for the gold lettering. But what happens now, if this is going to be the clear, well, yeah, and everything's flat, that coat of clear will lay down. But here, what's going to happen, as soon as you sand it, you're going to break through that edge, and that's not going to look good. And in this case, what you're really going to have to, you're going to keep hitting this edge all the time. So in essence, what you have to do is fill this part, and this is really making it a totally oversimplification, and then do the filling. If you want to have, and this would include the canopy, the cockpit, you want to be able to take your hand and go right over the canopy and not feel that edge where the canopy is. You've got to do some filling. So what I do is I call this selective finishing. And what I try to do is a combination of all of these things. First off, I try to get the model as smooth as possible at every step. Always 2/3 on the top, 1/3 on the bottom. And that works better than you think. Most people don't look at the bottom. And what happens? You're going to carry an extra ounce of clear. Put it on the top. If you decide your model's light enough, you can afford it. This is one of the best tricks that I know of. And I remember many, and I will not mention any names, flipping other people's planes over, looking on the bottom and thinking maybe they didn't put any clear on the bottom. I mean, other people maybe do this less, but I think 2/3 and 1/3 is about right. Bob Gialdini's Stingray had almost no clear on the bottom. It wasn't even white on the bottom. Now this is the point we're at now, and this is so important to figure out this part of it, that if you can do selective finishing over rough areas, you're going to be able to save a lot of weight. Now what I did, and I don't know how clear it came across in the video, is I put 1 coat of clear on the whole plane, but then I carefully went by and over the joints put an extra coat, or 2 extra coats. Anywhere that the paint joined, anywhere the lettering, I try to get some extra on the lettering, because it always seems like you sand through spots on the lettering and you need to go back and touch it up. So that's one thing, is to get paint edges. Another thing, anywhere there's an edge, extra clear around the edges, because that's where it's going to wear out when you go to buff it. Even around the hinge lines. So you can pretty much see what's happening is the whole plane doesn't have, and we're trying to do this with 1 coat of clear, or at best a little more than a coat of clear. I think the Spitfire we did about 1/4 and a pint. But the whole plane doesn't have that. But now we're at the point right now today that what we're going to do is these selective areas that have extra clear, we're going to try to sand these down and get these as level as possible. And dress off the edges, because that's where it's a little rough. But all of the places that have extra clear, what we want to do, and it's real simple. In our case, we're dealing with something that looks like that. We want to break this edge, break the edge, so that it maybe in its final case it looks like that, so that the last coat or 2 of clear, and even when I put the last coat of clear on, I'll put a little extra over there, so that in the final analysis, the top it's going to look like this. And this will be the clear material here. And you will not feel the edge. When you run your hand over it, you will not feel the edge. Now, by doing it this way, believe me, you save a lot of weight. It's more work, but in the final analysis, you save material, number one. Not that it would matter, but you'd probably save a 1/2 quart of material. You also save sanding, because if you don't put it on, you don't have to sand it off. A lot of people, I remember, people in our club that would put a gallon of clear on a plane, and then sit and spend 400 hours sanding it off to level everything. But the point was, you didn't have to, in here it was nice and level. Everything was, here, all of these, the only spot they needed that clear on was to bury that paint seam. And instead they buried the whole plane, then the plane would come out 2 or 3 ounces too heavy. Selective finishing. If you pick up on this little idea, I think you can really improve your modeling skills. Question is, how much clear do I put on this plane or that plane? We started off with, and I use a big pickle jar, Rich Jacobone donated it, a quart of thinner. Now that makes a relatively thick mix, but for that first coat, that keeps from melting canopies, melting ink lines, smearing everything up. So if you can basically get the first coat on thick, roughly 50-50, at about 25 psi, that'll work for you. That'll work real well. Now, you take what's left over, because obviously this jar is now, after painting that first coat, you've used up some of the material. What I would do now is I would add maybe half of that amount in thinner. And this is not critical. You just want to make it thinner. So now you have a little bit thinner mix. Let's call this medium. For your next couple of coats, you spray in medium. Now you're going to get down to the end of this pickle jar, or this whatever it is. And somewhere down the end, you're only going to have enough for the last coat. Now you want to take the last coat and add even a little more thinner and spray this on with the lowest possible pressure it'll spray with. Sometimes you can get it down, I can get it down to 15 psi. So you see what's happening is we started with an amount of clear, but we've never added more clear, but we're constantly, each time we put a coat on, making it thinner, thinner, and thinner. This serves to lay out the paint much thinner. One of the things that people have trouble understanding, when you spray any lacquer, it goes on like golf balls. If you looked under a microscope, it would look like this. It's not a sealed surface, it's a porous surface. It always dries at some microscopic level. It dries, when you see overspray, it's parts that have totally dried before they've hit the plane. So when you get an ability to make the dots smaller, what it lets you do is get a thinner coat of dope on. This dope thickness, by atomizing the paint, using less pressure, or let's say in the best of all, maybe with these new guns we have, we're even going to be able to save more weight because we're atomizing the paint a lot more accurately. We're getting on a thinner and thinner coat. Now at some point in time, you could use an airbrush. I know Stan Powell used to, or at least I've heard that he used an airbrush to do his whole plane. The problem with an airbrush that I've found is a lot of times when you spray so dry and so thin, you have a problem with the tape, or not even the tape, that the paint will just come off like saran wrap. So somewhere in here, and right about here is where I want to be, is I want to have the coats of clear going on. The first coat can go on real thick, second coat a little thinner, but when I get to this last coat, I want this last coat, if possible, to be just one wet, smooth coat, and that'll save me the absolutely all the extra work that it would take to rough sand these out. To take a look at what we have, if you look at this, well, let's see if we can get this on a macro lens. This is the first coat of clear is on here, then I put extra across here if I remember right, but I can still feel that line. Now to really have this, that it's really, really nice, and that to me nice is that you can't feel those lines and that it's perfectly smooth. This has dried up real well, and I think we'll be ready later today to just wet sand this out with 1200, possibly put the next coat on, and once we have totally made these little lines disappear, that's all the clear that's going to go on the plane. And if you really wanted to, I mean, if you were really going to look to be, I don't know, museum quality, you could take that last coat of clear and just put it on ever so thin. I always save the little pieces like this, because these are the ones that'll tell me if the paint is dry enough. Now in different shop conditions it'll dry. Before you sand this, two things. You want to make sure you have enough paint on here. If you only had one micro thin coat, right away you're going to sand it. The other thing is when you're sanding a part that has paint lines, as soon as you see you going through, you have to stop and go put another coat of clear on. Remember, what we're trying to do is get that minimum thin amount of clear on here. If you're willing to just put that extra 2 or 3 ounces of clear on, you don't need to go through any of these steps. But being able to cut the final weight, see what it allows you to do is when you can put less paint on a plane, you can then put real motor mounts in a plane, put real controls, a real wing spar, a tail spar, things that make the plane more rigid. So then you have a plane that's rigid at the same time that it's light, instead of being real light and it's just like a rubber band airplane. So you really do it. It's the best of all worlds. If you can save an ounce of weight on clear and put it into structure, you've got the best of all worlds. I have some, there's two different kinds of 1200. I have some, this 1200, it's made by Merca, seems to have a little more grit than the yellow back. I don't know who makes the other one. I'll call it this. I've realized in sanding this out that there's a little difference. This seems a little bit, well, maybe finer, I think this is the right word. I also have some other stuff, some experimental stuff I'm going to try, but for right now, I wanted to get a feel for on one of my little parts, get that out of here, one of the little parts, just how much work it was going to be to knock down that edge. Now, because we don't have a step, we have, it looks like, where two lines join, it's really not a big job. And what I'm looking to do is, in general, smooth out the whole area. It almost guarantees that at some point in time I'm going to go through, see, and right here I'm going through already because there's a high spot. But I have my little touch-up kit, so as I go along, as I go down life's merry lane, keep the touch-up kit open. I want to sand each part, and because we're still waiting for snow to melt out there, it won't matter if I even finish this today. I'm not going to be able to paint until we get some decent weather. But now I've gone through in a little spot here. Let's look real close. No problem. I have my little touch-up kit. And this is going to happen because I'm dealing with, now this is fine right here. Up here, see, I need to sand that just a little bit more. I want the whole surface to look just like it is here. So when I'm looking this over, and because I know I'm trying to cheat the clear. Now if I was just willing to blow on that extra coat or two of clear, yeah, you might not sand through as much. But when you sand through, you know you have that minimum amount of clear on there, and that usually allows you to put real parts in the airplane without having to cheat the parts. A lot of people cheat the parts and then they put on that, they just put the clear on like it's indiscriminate. I like it better to have the parts. Now this looks like this part, let's see if we can get this on a close-up here. This is about what the whole thing should look like. Just mild scratches, touch-up, and from this point on, we should only be 1 or 2 coats of, and you can't feel that at all. If you close your eyes, you have no idea that stripe is there at all. We're 1 or 2 real thin coats of clear away from having this done once we touch these little spots up. Touch-up kit is one of the things that at some point in time pays itself, pays dividends. And obviously when we put the clear, we'll put just a little bit extra over this. And it may seem like this is a lot of work, but I guarantee you one thing, if you've ever built a plane and when you're all done with the plane you've said, gee, I wish I could make it an ounce lighter. Well, this is a way you can make it an ounce lighter and there's no downside. It'll be just as pretty or prettier, the finish will be smoother. Oh, I just went overboard there. And when we get some weather to paint, we'll have all the parts sanded, hopefully have them all ready to go. But without a touch-up kit right now, if you had 5 big cans, or you'd always find an excuse not to go get the can and touch the part up. At least I would anyway. Black, you always have the choice of touching it up with ink, but in this case, because we have a touch-up kit, it's no big deal at all. And I'll remember now, because I'll see that when I'm painting, to just put extra paint right along that edge, extra clear. But that's the secret to getting a light finish, selective finishing. Now the clear is really sanding out beautifully, but this is one thing, where these ridges are, this sanded right out in a matter of 30 seconds. This I can see is like a little bit of a washboard, and I don't want to see that in the final, in the final finish. So I'm just gonna grind away at it until I go through, then touch it up so I know. Oh, that's almost done. But that's a tough one when you have a lot of little stripes like that, to get it level. To get this perfectly level. Now, as I've said before, there's always a lot of pluses and minuses to take apart construction. This is definitely one of the pluses, is the fact you can pick these parts like the tail up, put them in your hand and work on them. I find this to be very convenient. Whenever you use an M600, you want to get some good ventilation going. I've got a nice big fan blowing. I always shut the heat off in the house because I don't want to bring the smell up through the house. I just let it open the back door and let it blow out into the snow. Another, maybe a downside of take-apart construction is there's all these little extra edges and areas, and where you're more than likely going to break through is right on an edge. So when I get to an edge, I'm always real careful to get right up on the edge. of the things that I like to get at this point in time. Get the sandpaper right in and clean up all these definition areas, high definition areas. I don't want to have a whole bunch of extra paint in those low areas. Sanding out these parts, one of the things you can expect to do very, very often is hit the white ink. You see how I've hit the white ink? Because the white ink sits up higher than the black ink. So now that I know I'm into the white ink, I have to real carefully go around that so that I don't have to replace line. That's all I can do till I get more clear. Now see, over the white ink I would put 2 or 3 times the amount of clear as the black ink. But that white ink really does dress it up, just like white Letrasets seem to dress it up in an inordinate amount. Karen had a good comment. She came down and looked at the Letraset job and she said, "You should have put my name in bigger Letrasets." Oh man, that's why I love her. What I realized while sanding out the flaps is, and it's good information, is I'm only giving this one quick swipe because the white is sitting up and I really don't have enough clear on here. But that's okay. I can sand basically all around it, and that's what I'm going to do. And when I put the next coat of clear on, I'll put at least 2 or 3 extra coats on the white. Now see, what I'm trying to do is sand the lines without going out onto the white. And again, any little spot that I go through, obviously touch it up. But that white ink, it might even be safer to say at this point in time, before you go and even sand it once, is to have, 3, 4, maybe 5 coats of clear on top of it. Now today it's the hard part. The hard part of this is, we did all the easy parts yesterday. This is going to be very difficult and time consuming to get in all these angles, edges, around the fillet without going through. The canopy. This part here will probably take a couple hours to get the wet sanding out. I want to be real careful. As soon as I see I'm going through a letter in any way, stop, and I'll put more clear on it. Because again, remember, I've got such a small amount of clear on here, I don't want to take a chance that I'm going to have a lot of spots to touch up. I'd like to touch up the minimum amount possible. Now this is one of the things I always try to be careful that I'm not getting rushy. Once you start to rush this, it just turns into a problem. At least for me, it turns into a problem. There's a lot of little angles and edges. I lay this out on a big stack of towels, get some fans going to get rid of the fumes. If it wasn't for all that snow out there, we'd be able to work outside. And I guess one of the things that I've learned in the past is you just can't rush this. If it takes an extra coat of clear in certain spots, I know it's going to take extra clear over these stripes. Anyway, you have these 2 paint lines joining, you know you're going to need a little bit extra. The trick always is keep the sandpaper soaking wet. Soaking wet. The reason I use this instead of water or Windex or whatever, windshield washer fluid, the idea of this is it doesn't soak in, and this is the wood fuselage, so I don't want anything. Actually, on the carbon one, it wouldn't matter what we use. Nothing's going to really soak in there. This just takes, in my book, it just takes a lot of patience. There's no real trick for doing this. I have to work my way. I'm working my way down the stripe. I'm not so concerned about going over like an area right here where there's no Letrasets or here. What I want to do is with a Letrasets, because I can still feel them with my finger. And I try to, if I can't feel it, then I stop. Because then I'm only going to go through if I keep sanding. And the last thing on this fuselage, this one has the plastic canopy. I want to really be careful to blend that canopy in. As soon as I see I'm going through, I've moved that tape so many times. But the nice part about this is after a day of sanding like this, you can really see the difference. You can feel it. You don't even have to look. You could do this part of the job and, you know, watch a football game or whatever while you're doing it. Again, the trick is, as soon as you feel that you can't feel a paint line, it's time to quit. One of the areas that I guess I'm more fussy than I even have to be here, is up on the canopy where we have that blend, where it's coming in. Because I'd like to have this, when I'm all done, that's just totally smooth, like it was made out of one piece. Now, Dan Banjock had some trouble with getting the paint to stick to the canopy, and it looks like this is sticking pretty good. But if it wasn't, I would suggest you just sand the canopy before you spray it with either 12 or 600. And each coat, now I'll put a couple extra coats even on this cockpit, because I really do think this is a focal point. Of course, one of the things I'm really fussy about, I'm trying to be fussy about, I'm not saying we're going to succeed here, is keeping these edges nice and crisp. Anywhere there's an edge, I'm using those rubber polywog tools. This is a good tip, by the way. I'm trying to keep everything around the cockpit crisp. By keeping these edges small, I minimize the chance I'm going to have a bubble or a blister when I take it out in the sun. Anywhere there's an inside corner, this is an excellent way to do it. The polywogs give you a real good control over it. The first time you sand the canopy and you see it coming up all foggy like that, you get as nervous and crazy as can be. As soon as you paint that with clear, that'll be as shiny as can be. Fillets, this is one of the areas I wanted to really make perfect. And these don't look too bad. Now, I don't know how the carbon fiber ones on the carbon fuse, well, they're very similar, but so far, not a blister, a bubble, or anything, but of course we haven't taken it out in the sun yet. The sun is what really puts it to the test. And I guess just detailing out these parts. Now the problem is, once I finish this, obviously I have to do another one. But maybe I can get both of these done today and get some idea, you know, if any little touch-ups have to happen. So far the fillets, though, fillets still look pretty good on this. Now these little areas like this little crease that I've been doing, I'm just dressing it off. In this little scoop, one of the nice things about this scoop being composite is it's got a hard edge. If it's balsa wood and you do that with your fingernail, boom, never get it out. And no matter what happens with this project from this point on, I feel like the carbon fiber parts of it are not ever going to be a problem. We'd be able to use these if we were making a cardinal. Now that all the edges and lines on this are all perfectly flat, now I can get that final ink line around the canopy that adds some definition to it. This fuselage is basically done, and what I'm waiting for now is a nice cup of coffee from Karen, and I'm going to start on the second fuselage. And then we have the wing left to do. Well, we're closing in on this. Now, one of the things about the carbon fuselage that I really think is nice is when it comes to a thing like this wet sanding, you never have to worry about getting your finger stuck in it or your fingernail or something. It seems like it's there is an amount that it's easier to sand out, easier to letraset, and it's certainly less, at this point in time, less vulnerable to little dings and dongs that we all know happen. Isn't quite as much fun as knowing you've just finished one fuselage and you turn around and it's like Groundhog Day. You got to do it all over again. That's the fun of it. When it comes to doing the wing bays, This is one of the things, and I generally go through in about 10 different spots. And you can see, now this is so that you can see the reality of doing this. Let me just finish up one bay here. Now you can see I've gone through, again, because I'm trying to do this whole thing with maybe a quart or just a little more than a quart of dope. If you're willing to just blow on a gallon of dope, you'll never go through. See the little spots where I've gone through? A little spot up here? Doesn't matter at all, because I'm going to, first off, I'm going to touch up all these spots. And when it's done and it's buried and clear, what's important is that it has the smooth feel. Because all of these are spots that are high spots right now. And the sooner I can knock them back down, that last coat or 2 coats of clear will go right over that, and it'll leave that really smooth finish that really is as light as it possibly can be. So I don't get overly concerned. I don't want to sand through every bay, but when I go through, I know I'm going to go through. I know ahead of time I'm going to have my touch-up kit. And in the case of this, what I'll do is I'll back mask this and just hit this with the spray. I know that that's part of when you want to do that ultra light finish, the lightest possible finish, that's part of the price. It was all gone today. It's up to about 40 degrees. Oh, what's this in the driveway? Dennis, you're on video. Look at this. That's the roof to my house they're throwing away. Anyway, we are, and you can see all the stuff in the driveway, right when we could be finishing Miss Ashley. We're going to be putting a roof on the house and some gutters and whatnot. But in the meantime, we've been having such good luck, and it's such a nice dry day. Ooh, with all the snow gone. Breezy but dry. I'm giving this gun some more workout. I want to get some coats of clear on the stuff, and today's a great day to do it. Because we have the access to this day, rather than working on some other project, well, we're going to be spending about half of the day doing roofing stuff, and the other half of the day, and I'm trying to pick the best half of the day for, well, basically for getting some clear on this. These are all sanded out nice, and I've just been waiting patiently, letting them sit by the heating vent, and I think today it'll dry beautifully. All these parts here, they're gonna need at least one more coat of clear, but the main thing is to get the fuselage out there, because that's going to need even one extra coat around all those electrosets and all those ink lines. I'm getting more and more familiar with this spray equipment. What I've been trying to do is run lower and lower pressures, and we're down to about 20 pounds right now. I'm sure we can go even lower. It appears that this equipment atomizes the paint a whole lot better than our typical hobby guns. And it seems to work better at less pressure. That's the part of it that I think we can exploit even more. And as we go into this, I'm going to try to run lower and lower pressure. And we'll see. Because every time you can avoid orange peel, everybody knows what orange peel is. Anytime you can avoid some orange peel, you're saving labor and you're saving weight both at the same time. Really seems to lay down a nice coat of paint. Now this really is laying down beautifully. I've just had really good luck with this gun. I'll tell you one thing. That is really working well. Now it'll be interesting to see. Mike is right on the verge of his plane is in silver and it's ready to paint. We're going to try to and he's an up-and-comer in the world of spraying, and see if he has the same good luck that I have. But that clear is just laying right down. See, a part of it too is that it's cold out here. The cold seems to give the dope even more time to lay down. This is the carbon fuselage, and I'm just trying to lay it at a couple of different angles. See if you can see what that's our second coat of clear dope on there. And this may need a third coat, I don't know. But even if it does, the more you can get the dope to lay down, the less sanding there's going to be. There's virtually no orange peel anywhere. I have yet to see orange peel come out of this gun. So far, so good. William Nomura, you're okay. I don't care what anybody says about you. Frank McMillan says about you. Just kidding around. Yeah, that does. I don't know if you can see this, but now when Mike Kajeski starts doing his plane, then we'll find out even more about this equipment. And I think it's going to work out just great for us. Now you can see what I've tried to do to the wing. I've only put clear over the lettering, the parts of the lettering. I'll give that 2 or 3 extra coats because that's where it's going to be real prone when I go to wet sand that final coat out before buffing, or that it'll buff through. Right in the center. And boy, you can see how nice that gun lays down paint without any extra overspray. And while this is drying, we can go rip the plywood off the garage roof. Now you never see it in the video, but the roof on this house is so bad that the last couple of storms we've had, basically chunks of the roof and chimney have been winding up in the neighbor's yard. And rather than risk a possible lawsuit or water damage to our Spitfire bedroom, anyway, wing on camera.
Here's the wing on camera.
All right, now he did this one right for a change. Let's see the gear blocks. All right, put them up on the camera. Don't be ashamed.
I'm not ashamed.
You're about a big. All right, yeah, that's nice. All right. All right, I put some more paint on the plane while you guys were roofing along. Let me get a coat of clear on it.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do here, and notice I'm doing it on the little parts. I'm trying to get the pressure down as low as it'll go. I'm trying to get it down to about, well, we're down at 15 right now. Let's see what happens. See, I don't want to do this on a big part. See, that really lays down at 15 now. What I'll do with the next little part, I'll drop it down to about 12. And at some point in time, it's not going to spray. We'll see if we can get a... I'm down to 15, Mike.
Down to 15, okay.
At 12. We're still spraying. This is relatively thin, though. Well, we'll go to 10. What the limit is going to be, but we're at 10 now. Now it's really getting down to the nitty-gritty. Again, what's important is that it just lays down with no orange peel. At least to me it's important. And this is at 10 pounds. And this should save quite a bit of sand out. We'll find out every time I say that. But that's what I want to look for in a coat of clear. I want it to lay out flat like that. And that's one of the characteristics the Brodak Clear really has over any other product I've ever seen. I think somebody just fell off the roof. Oh, I think Mike just fell off the roof. Anyway, we are ripping wood apart. Okay, we're down to 8 pounds. Ooh, this looks like this may be it. Uh-oh, the cops are here. I don't know, what I wanted you to see and see firsthand is how this material lays down. Because it's in the way that it lays down that makes it special, makes it easy to get that nice finish. What? They just fell off the roof. Huh? Whenever you're around a construction site, you hate to hear laughter. You know it's part of my house that just went in a dumpster. Anyway, even at 8, I would say 8 is about the limit for this material. But it's really laying down nicely. And we'll see what it's like when it dries. Boy, if you've ever had a plane and when you get done you go to look at it, in by the wing and body it's all orange peely. Oh, makes you sick. You know you have hours and hours of painful sanding. Now I went down to 6, and you can still paint at 6, but it just, I don't know, I don't think there's any advantage. Somewhere around 8 pounds, this material that I'm spraying right now, right around 8 pounds, it's laying down. I mean, I don't know that you're going to get any better than that. I don't know that you can get, but I'll be interested in talking to Bill Nomura and see if he has some ideas, some feedback. I've been sending him up the videos to look at. Maybe he can enlighten us in a couple of areas using his equipment, but it certainly atomizes and sprays beautifully. I'm really, really impressed with this equipment. Mike's soon to be finished Cardinal, soon to be finished with the new spray equipment as a test. You got some extra clear on the lettering. Fuselage is all dry and all the parts. Now it's really starting to look like an aircraft hangar. An aircraft hangar without a roof. A man without a roof. Where's that? All right, let's see these gear blocks now. You were so... The last one he didn't have the gear blocks. That's a nice. Okay, that's nice. I like that. A typical... How many of these Cardinal wings did you make so far?
This is the third one.
This is number 3 off the jig?
Right.
Yeah,
no,
that's nice.
This one's off the rods.
Off the rods. But you use that, the tombstone.
Right.
This a tombstone wing?
Right.
Nice and straight. Crooked as a pretzel. You better give it to me. All right. The tombstone wing. All right, now what do you want to do? You want to go take those Spitfires off the wall?
They got to come off the wall, otherwise they're going to fall off the wall.
Now, in today's mail, some really nice photos in between Mike falling off the roof and a ladder and dumpsters falling in my yard and everything. Here's the deal. Anyway, this is directly from the Reuben. This is the plane Reuben got caught spraying at work and a dope blushed and he had to go spray retarder. Well, he's finally told me, wow, it's perfect, Windy. Anyway, we'll run through these pictures real quickly. I'll send them down to Stunt News. Really, really looks nice. Reuben now. Reuben is the father, the mentor. Stephen is the student, but it looks like they even got the wheel pants on straight. Oh, look at this. This is cool. Building tips on Windy's videos. Special thanks to Reuben. Pretty cool. That'll earn you extra credits at the next pierogi convention. Anyway, I want to run through these. Now, the special story here. Reuben, the dad, used to be, or still is, a really awesome scale builder. So having his son build up a Brodak Cardinal, and we'll be getting this flying as soon as it stops snowing. Anyway, Stephen just turns out that he was just thrilled to death with the way this came out. It's all Brodak dope. In fact, he was so thrilled with it. Look at this. He made up business cards with his picture on them. I didn't even know he was the secretary of the club. Shows you that I don't pay my dues. But anyway, that was real nice. Now, obviously, Stephen's still going through the period of time during which he wants to impress the chicks with his beard and whatnot. Anyway, there's a nice picture. Hey. Well, I hope they're going to publish some of these in Stunt News. This will be real nice. Now, his father, this is really cool, his father was a scale builder, and I don't know, he placed real high in the Nats one year with a Jap Zero. He has business. Why don't you make me some business cards? Jeez, I'm the only guy in the world that has these cheesy, no Windy business. I don't even have any business cards. Anyway, there's some pictures of his scale model from, I believe, 92, but I could be wrong. Anyway, from the McBride family, and hey, I really have to say, I hope you guys get back into it, and we're going to see you at the flying field real soon. Steve and Ruben. And from another master of the pierogi machine, Ken Clapson. Now, Ken was talking to my wife the other day on the phone, and I thought, oh no, here we go. He's telling her how great his tsunami is and everything, but he wasn't. He was telling her about his greenhouses, of all things. Ken builds greenhouses, and he runs some kind of farm with his brother. Not really sure I understand enough about farming, but he always sends me some cool pictures. And I hope he will include some of these to our buddy Paul Winter. Paul, this is the way. And let me just be honest about this, Paul. Your finish, the blue one is okay, but the part you didn't do, the hard part, the lettering, see, the tsunami, the numbers, all little da-da-da-da-da-da. See, now Ken doesn't cheat the system. Ken goes all out, Paul. Anyway, Paul's over in England watching these videos. Ken's up in Canada. Now, we've seen the tsunami before. Nothing too cool about that, and we know in the final fly, since Windy doesn't have his tsunami, the last two tsunamis on the planet here are Ken Clapson's and Paul Winter's, and I have to be impartial. I think Ken's is a little nicer, Paul. Even got the little exhausts and everything. But anyway, Ken has been working on a stuntress. And look at these. Got a little, looks like a little bit modified from Joe's plans. The thin, pointy canopy, the elliptical wing. It's aeropoxy light. It's obviously all aeropoxy dope. Aeropoxy filleting material. Nice canopy. I have to tell you now. That's check this out. Check the little scoop out. Now I don't know if he did this. Maybe he bought a scoop from me and I don't even know it, or he just did it on his own. That is definitely cool. Like the scoop. The little NASCAR scoop. Nice Brodax silver, needless to say. Looks like he's got the little hatch in the back for the adjustable. This looks nice, and he's going to have me make him up a tune pipe with two stingers sticking out the sides. I don't know. We've got drawings for that, but it'll be a while for the pipe. I'm waiting for resin. One of the scourges of the pipe business, waiting for materials to come in. Anyway, this is his I-beam version of the Eliminator. And this is Ben's Flight Streak, hey. Anyway, I'm glad to have the pictures, and I hope they're going to publish some of these in Stunt News. Anyway, love it. And by the way, where is that one picture? This is Paul. I know Paul has got his heart in the right place, but Paul, it's the lettering that makes tsunami tsunami. The 18, the lettering, all of the wave. Now, I know he's making voodoo this year, and we've seen it, but you can't, like, make voodoo and not put the checkerboards on. Now, we'll see how Paul does with voodoo. Just real quick, this is mail Ken sent Karen of his greenhouses. They grow tomatoes in the middle of the winter. This is too involved for me. Anyway, he's got a lot of captions, but I'm sure Karen's going to love looking at this. Tomatoes. Vines, look at this snowed in. Ken, I gotta tell you, if this was mine, I'd put a roof on it and make a flying field out of it. And just fly level all the time. Anyway, look inside of this build. Absolutely great. Anyway, I'll check this out with Karen and I'll see if she approves of your, this is an agroponic business. Pretty cool. Me a couple of weeks so I get some resin in and we'll be making up some pipes for you and a couple other guys. Now there's, just look at the difference. Paul, the lettering, tsunami. That's what makes it. As we speak, I get an order from Joe out of Musco. We're going to be making up a special pipe for his stuntress with a bend in it, so well, before this project's over, you'll get to watch us make some more pipes. Here's a product I've been experimenting with. Rich Peabody brought this over here, and I was looking at it, and I was thinking, gee whiz, just too late to be using this. They're abrasive, laminated to different shaped sponges, and you can see the different shapes, which when we actually do some carving and sanding. Now, Rich has been using this for a while. Let's give this guy a plug. This is interesting stuff, and I'm not sure I know exactly where and when and how I can use it, but I'll certainly find out. And like the new spray equipment that we've been using, I'll try anything. Anything that can make my life easier. Now, he sent 2 packs. This was 1 pack, and this is relatively rough. I guess we would normally use that for wood. But there's also another pack, and this is what has my interest right now, since it's a little too late to use the wood ones. 600 to 800 grit, 8 to 12, and 15 to 2000. Now, I wanted to try some of that 15 to 2000 to see if this was going to be any better than 1200. Let's see, do we have any 1200? Yeah, we have the Yellowback 1200, the 3M. And we have this Superfine 1200, which both seem to be similar. But I wanted to try, so I obviously tore off a little piece. In fact, I took one of these and cut it in 4 pieces. Now, it's a nice soft back sponge. And the good thing is, these are about $5, I think, each. Needless to say, I didn't pay Rich. Which is the way I like to do it, by the way. Anyway. Rich donated these to the cause. We're going to try using these. Now, I'm going to try, since I have to sand this, what I hope will be the last or next to last coat of clear, this is a good time to try this. Again, let's see if we can get that website up there. Relatively inexpensive, Sandman abrasives. And for right now, for the paint part of it, this might, for $5, I'll try anything, even if it's Rich's $5. And by the way, if this works well, this will be one of the things we can use at the finishing demo out at Brodax. The thing I needed to find out in my little test is, see, a lot of these sponges, as soon as you hit them with M600, they kind of delaminate. This has nice rounded edges too, so I have to watch when I cut it that I'm not using one of the sharp edges. But considering the price of sandpaper, and boy, the last sleeve of sandpaper I bought, the price went up again, of course, as it always does. So I think for a package of stuff that's in this price range, it's relatively inexpensive. And I want to see how long it's going to take to knock down a coat of clear that's been dry. Now see, when it's only dry a day or two like this, it's relatively difficult to sand. It's still a little on the soft side. But if it sands this, you know, once it dries out, don't want to go on the edge anymore. 1 swipe on the edge is all you get. Now the key is, after sanding, I don't want to feel, see, here's an edge I missed right here. That's a missed spot. But as I look down the part, and I'm looking for any little flaws, any little imperfections, any little, well, looks like that worked relatively well. Now the main thing is, did it delaminate from the M600? No. Now here's a little spot we missed. Let's see how long it takes to take care of that. Right up here you can see, now this is what we're striving for, is totally flat. This is a spot that we just missed. One thing about the sponge, it's relatively easy to hold it. You can hold it with 1 finger, in fact. Where the sandpaper, what happens is, at least my hands, I tend to get chewed up calluses and everything gets dried out and cracked and peeling, and especially because now I'm going to have to be working at least half of the day up on a ladder on a roof and making sure Mike doesn't drop a hammer on me or something. Be surprised how quick you can duck when you see a shingle coming off the roof. Now that looks like it worked real well. Now the test is going to be, is when we hit this with Gorham's. This side we haven't done yet. That's what it typically looks like, and you got all these little pit marks and dust that sticks in there. But once it's sanded, now what I want to see is how long it's going to take for that to buff up. Oh, we see another. I'll take care of this spot off camera. There's a little spot on the edge, but other than that, then the other criteria is, I don't want to feel those stripes. I want everything to be as if everything is buried in paint. Now what I always do to test to see if the paint is hard enough being, what happens with dope is typically over a range of maybe a week, it'll get harder and harder and harder. So if you put it aside to dry for a week, let's say a week, it'll be easier to buff because the harder it is. The reason a diamond shines is because it's hard. The reason Jello doesn't shine is because it's soft. But one of the things that I always try is, now this is not even 24 hours since the last time I've recoated this. Yeah, it is 24 hours. Usually after 24 hours you can do a little bit of buffing and you can get knocked down all the edges and everything. Now what happens is you want to look and see if it's going to buff up. Now that's buffing up a little bit, but not as much as I'd really like. I'd really like it to buff up a little quicker than that. See, and I can still see the little scratches and things. Well, the reason is this dope is still soft. So what I'm going to do, I'll finish this part, but I'm going to put this aside to dry for a day or so while we're working on the roof. And while this is drying, each day that goes by, it'll get easier and easier and easier for the simple reason that the dope gets harder and harder, and it'll accept the shine. Now, you could sit, if there was a rush, if the Nats was tomorrow or something, you could sit here and pick another spot that's, you want to just see if it's going to come up. Always do a little test. And you'll always get a little bit of a shine if you even after a day or two. But if you put it, actually the longer you can put it aside to dry or do other work or go install a bathroom in your house or something or whatever. This is the part that people want get nervous, and other products you really need to wait 6 to 8 weeks. I've found that sometimes even after only a couple of days it'll buff right up. Now that's reasonable. I mean, it's not great, but what's going to happen is as the week goes by, this is going to get easier and easier and better and better and better. But another thing that I've done over the years, don't do any buffing. Just do all the sanding. So with my little sponges here, I'm going to try, I'll sand out parts in the time that I have available here. Just do the sanding. Because as you're sanding, you're opening up more and more of the dope to air, and it should harden up, dry up even quicker. What these guys are doing to my beautiful fish pond. I thought you guys were going to wear clean clothes when you're on international video. My fish pond. I told them they drop one shingle in a fish pond, they'll get swimming lessons. Anyway, I'm the garbage collector. Nice wood, huh? No, this is the truth. They made me the cleanup boy here. I'm the cleanup boy. I got to clean all this up and put it in the dumpster. God. I had such a nice yard until about, well, a nice snowblower anyway. Like that balsa wood, Mike? Look at all the balsa wood I had stashed up here. Oh my God. Lone Star balsa. Oh my God. My poor Power Master fuel. What are you guys doing in my house? Left of my illustrious. What the hell did they do to my... Hey Mike, what did you do to my pad? Mike, this was my good pad. Oh, look. This goes in my van.
Would you throw that away?
Look at these. Never hire Mike to do it. This goes on look at these. What a bunch of bozos. What?
Stay around here. Don't leave us alone.
The reason I'm recording this is now, well, very soon this summer, going to be our official molding shop. This is going to become an official... Now today, you know, we spent a couple of days fooling around with the garage roof here before we actually start the house. I let this sit 3 days to see if it would sand out, and it looks like it's sanding out a whole lot better with 1200. Now one of the things that I noticed, the sanding sponges, the 2000 grit, when I did the final buff out, even on 3-day-old dope, they did leave little tiny scratches. So what I'm going to try to do is call that company and see if I can get some maybe 2500 grit or something with a little finer grit. The 1200, this is 1200 here by the way, the 1200, usually after 3 days it'll just, there's nothing sticking, there's no chewing gum, and it'll leave that nice matte flat flat, ready to buff area. Now what I'm going to do to save time, and this is a good trick, in fact it's one that when you're pressed for time you can use, is do all the sanding rather than sand and buff, because in essence this will take me 2 or 3 days to get it all sanded. We're only doing short sessions, but what will happen then is by the time I actually get the buff, when we want to dope the hardest, it'll already be 3 days old, so it should buff out a whole lot easier. So the plan right now is to get, let's see if we can get up close and see what the flat surface looks like up to this point. But each day that goes by, this will get easier and easier and easier. And by the way, I got a cool tape today in the mail from Al Rabe. Al sent me a tape. I don't even know the gentleman's name right now, so I'm just watching the tape for the first time, but he's painting an Oriental, and he does it very, very quickly with automotive paint. It looks like he's got some real nice techniques. I hope he's going to write something for Stunt News. I'm real excited about anybody that will help further the hobby or help everybody get a nice finish on, no matter how you do it. It's all good information. And I look forward to, you know, hopefully seeing the article myself. Using this method, we'll leave the wing to last and get all the little parts done. You can see I got the elevators already sanded. There's not much exciting about sanding things out with 1200 other than just get a nice TV program on, get some Reno Air Race videos. You can fall asleep while you're doing it. And I'll probably leave the fuselages right to the very end too. Today we're going to start the day off right with a big cup of coffee because it's pouring rain out there. And what my hope is that I'm going to get a lot of this done. Now I always try to do this on days, you know, basically can't spray anything today, so, but we're about, well, except for touch-ups, almost done with the spraying. Now what I wanted to, the point I wanted to make with this part in particular, we have 2 of these to do. This part really only needs 2 coats of clear. It doesn't need a lot of extra clear, except for up here where we have some paint striping. But it's going to be on the bottom. That's one thing. It's a bottom part. It's not going to be on the top of anything. Not really going to see it. So this is an area where I put the minimum amount of clear. So when I sand this out, I want to be real careful. Now if I have extra clear, what I want to do, of course, I want it up on the top where I'm going to see it. Top of the fuselage, top of the wing, parts that I'm going to see. But I certainly don't want to put 10 extra coats of clear down here. Now where I have extra clear, and remember I'm trying to do this with selective finishing, up around here on the wing and tail, up around the lettering, around the shields, around the edges, wherever there's a paint edge, I want to bury that in paint. But on parts like this where it doesn't matter, I mean this is just something, it isn't going to matter here. So I don't want to use up my clear. It's like spending your money on something you're not going to enjoy. So if you're real careful and you selectively finish, that's how you, at least that's how I get the weight down to where it's very acceptable. And yet when I put the model out, all the parts that you see look real good. When you flip the model over, some of the spots that are a little short on clear, it's really not a factor. Has been sanding out his Cardinal. 2 or 3 times we sanded out the silver, and you can see he's got it down to it as very little silver in a lot of spots. Just the minimum you need. We're trying to keep the weight of the total plane down, because a lot of people, you know, it goes without saying, they leave out the doublers, they leave out the belt crank, they leave out the lead outs, whatever, and then put 12 ounces of paint on a plane. Well, bad decision. Now, when Joe Adamusco did the Cardinals, the Spitfires, one of the things he kept track of very accurately, how many hours it took him to wet sand out and buff out these finishes. And it was around 40 hours. So obviously what's going to happen, you're not going to do this in one session. I try to split it up into equal sessions. And on rainy days like this, I do a little extra, because I know on a nice day I'm going to want to do something relating to, probably touch up some areas with the spray or whatever. I know I can't paint today, so I can put a real hard day in of wet sanding and hopefully get a big chunk of this done. video that came from Al Rabe, and it's got a lot of good tips on it, a lot of good useful information. But our primary objective here is we definitely want to put a killer day of wet sanding in on. And we can start with these parts. Now when a part doesn't have any paint edges to deal with, and we know we have a real small amount of clear, I want to be real careful. Nothing but 1200 on here, and not be real careful around the edges, around here. I want to really make sure, as soon as, for instance, if I was to see an ink line starting to disappear, absolutely have to stop and then recoat it with clear and just touch it. Otherwise, you wind up with just too much paint on the plane. It's just so tempting. And I know there's a million people that have gotten to a point in this finish, they sand through, they can put another coat on, then another coat, buff it, another coat. Before you know it, you wind up with a plane that's way heavier than you really wanted it to be. This is kind of like, you know, it's like being on a diet. You just can't grab for the hamburger or for the pizza or for whatever. You've got to be real careful in sanding this out. And that's what I try to do with a rainy day. Now, one or the other choices that you have, if you have carbon fiber parts, cowlings, wheel pants, or whatever, and I would suggest you try this always, is first off, from this point on, you don't want to even consider using 600 sandpaper, even though it's tempting. It cuts right down, and yeah, everything is great. Wow, you can do the whole plane in an hour. Problem is, it leaves scratches, and that's a problem. With a 1200, it seems to me, doesn't leave scratches, at least under the shop conditions that I use. But you also, with carbon parts, or this is a carbon fiber shell, you can use just plain water instead of M600, or water with a drop or two of dish soap in. And the advantage of using water, you know, obviously it's real cheap. It's not $20 a gallon. It doesn't cut quite as good as M600, and I'm doing this just for demonstration purposes, that you still can use it. But you really want to be careful around wood parts, a wood elevator, anywhere there's hinges where the water can just go around and get into a hinge pocket. What I've seen people do, and what I've done already, you'd be sanding an elevator out with water, not realizing it's all dripping around into the hinge pocket. And then when it all dries out, where the hinge pocket is, it puckers up. You know how a wood door will puff up on a damp day. But on a carbon part, like on a Spitfire cowling, oh, no problem. On these bottom block shells, on the composite fuselage, there should be no problem at all. You just use an ordinary old water. Now I'm only using it to demonstrate that it's totally possible, and just about how much time it would normally take to make it dead flat. And I mean, this is the point at which you make the buffing a lot easier. Now, I purposely left a few spots on here that still need to be done, because what you need to be able to do at this point in time is identify when you're done. Right here, you're done. That's ready for buff out, even though, and I've explained already how we're going to do this, is just let this go, because we're going to take 3 or 4 days before we finish it, maybe a week, who knows, with this crazy roof. But up here, you still need to do it. You see the little shiny spots? It should be. Now here, we're fine. Up around here, looks like, and we do have extra clear up there. Now see that little shiny spot on the edge? We want to get rid of that. Up here, not done yet. Over here, not done yet. Not done. Done. So if you can identify what has to still be done, first off, you wouldn't want to spend another 5 minutes sanding something that's already done, because this part in particular has very little clear on it. So you just want to get it flat and stop. This is ready to buff. And water can be, if there's several other factors, if you have real delicate hands and you don't want to get your hands all dried out, you know, you can use rubber gloves. M600 tends to dry out your hands. Well, you know, if you can get your wife to do this part of the job, tell her it's, you know, you'll do the dishes for a month or whatever. But the thing is to pick up a little technique in your mind where you're doing just enough. The two things people do wrong that I've helped, or been able to help, they sand parts too long, and that's no good. I mean, it's no good if you go back down to raw carbon. You've just defeated the whole purpose of doing this. So the point is, if you put a little bit on, lay it on very smooth, and we've been able to do that with that new William Nomura spray gun. Don't put so much on that you have to sand so much off. Now here's a spot, we just did it. This is a spot that is now ready. So if you can pick up that technique, I think you have a real good chance of getting that, what we all strive for is that 7-ounce finish. Raw wood to finished plane, 7 ounces. Now, a lot of times I don't really achieve it. I get to a 7.5 or an 8-ounce finish, and I think on this plane, because there's a lot of tape lines, I might be at the 7.5 or 8 ounce range. But I've also seen people that are at the 12-ounce range and think they've gotten a, you know, some super finish. They blow on some kind of 2-part mix on the top of the plane and say, oh, gee, it only added 5.5 ounces. Well, you know, I don't know, you know. You got to keep track of the weights. You got to keep track of the volume. Now, when we're done with this, what we also want to keep track of is that we have not put more material on the plane than we need to. So if you were to put a gallon of clear on, it's guaranteed your arm is going to fall off before you can sand it off. What I suggest is a quart and a pint, or a quart if you're real careful about doing it. And if you're real careful, that's it. Now, and then allow yourself maybe another 4 ounces of material for touch-ups. It's better to have touch-ups, and Al Rabe used to say a block is not thin enough if you haven't gone through in you know, some spots. Well, same with paint. If you sand out the whole clear and don't have some little spots to touch up, probably means you have too much clear on a plane. But that gives you some idea in real time of how much time it should take, whether you use M600 or if you're going to run the risk. Just remember, water doesn't evaporate like M600. The reason for using M600 is any that would drip around the edge evaporates in a matter of nanoseconds. You can never put M600 out in a jar like this. You walk away and it's gone. That's because of the evaporative rate. And you're just using the liquid as a way of carrying off the extra material. Also, you want to look at the sandpaper. No chewing gum whatsoever. And if you've ever had a finish where you've sanded and looked and it's all full of the chewing gum actually leaves scratches in the final material, which made it very frustrating. I mean, I've seen people that have gotten really pro finishes, and then that last thing they sand and they can't get the scratches out. Oh, man. So from this point on, my suggestion is, well, it's not the right piece. Look, I don't have a piece with the 12. What you really want to do is use the discipline of using 1200 paper. Do this to get it flat. And maybe this is a technique we'll develop in the course of this model. And then let it sit long enough before you actually buffing, because it's the buffing. The sanding doesn't really get hurt when the material is new and soft, but the buffing can be very frustrating if the material doesn't dry. And I've found, yes, you can buff a plane after a day. Takes a lot of time. At the end of 3 days, it takes half the time. And if you, like some people, Ken Clapson for one, or Lou Walgast, they've let the plane sit for a good amount of time. Now it's a piece of cake. And if you think that's not a good idea, call up Ken Clapson. His plane looks absolutely gorgeous. And what he did, he put it aside to dry for a while. That's one of the secrets. Remember our old touch-up kit? Well, there's still spots we may want to use it on. But from this point on, because we're into the final finishing stages, what's going to happen is when we go through in a spot, and go through we will. Now you can see I've picked up a high spot right here. What that is a high spot in the material underneath it. What I'm going to do, now if I were to take a brush, because I've kind of thinned it out here too, and brush this in, you'd have to cover it with 100 coats of clear. It'd be a mess, and plus it'd be heavy. Now one of the things I'm going to do, because I still have all my guns all set up with the colors, I can just kiss that with a little bit of red, and then put maybe 1 or 2 coats of clear on the back here. But I certainly don't want to touch this part of it. This part is ready to be buffed out. So while I'm doing the wing and the fuselages and everything, this can be drying, and hopefully 3 or 4 days from now, I can blend that right in. Now, if you never go through, well, you know, congratulations. Where I go through is typically on the edge, and I can always get at the edge. I can just touch that. But if you don't go through, there's probably a good chance that you've got an ounce or 2 more clear on there than you need. Now, because it's pouring rain out there, I'm forced to do these little jobs inside. You can see how nice that blends in. And because the Brodak paint is loaded up with pigment, I don't have any problem. And right along the edge, obviously I'll go over that with a coat of clear and any other little spot I need to. Once that dries, A couple of coats of clear will take care of that. Well, and I bet that real small gun we got from William the Moor would be perfect for this. Only one problem is I already have the red in this gun. I'm just too lazy to change it. Now that's typically the spots I go through anyway, because I probably have, see the little corner piece? Now it's much better to do a touch-up and go over it with clear than, let's as an example, put a whole nother coat of clear over the whole part. That's how people build up extra weight, unnecessary extra weight on a plane. This way of sanding it, going through, touching it up, is so much lighter, you're just saving ounces here, than just keep coating a plane with clear, coating it. Only coat the spots you need to. Another spot, you can see we've got a little spot. Well, in the final finish, these won't be there. But just to get just enough on there to cover it, and then maybe 2 coats of clear one day apart, and when you sand that with 1200, it'll sand right back out. Now, as if anybody would worry about making a lightweight tip weight box cover, I don't think that's what we're worried about here, but when I did sand this out before, I just got into just a little bit of a chip out of the paint there. And since I don't care what this part weighs, you can see I've got a flat spot, I can just coat it. The few parts of the plane that we really don't care what it weighs. Now anything to do with black or any edges of black that I've gone through, ink will usually cover it right up. That little spot right there. And once that dries, we'll give that a couple of coats of clear. And once that dries up, I give that another couple of coats. And that'll blend right in. A day or two, the longer you can let it sit, the better it'll be. The easier it'll blend in. But that's one of the best kept secrets in the world of model planes. That's how many of the guys that wind up having these real nice light finishes, you look real close and there isn't, remember it's selective finishing. There isn't 30 coats of dope on a whole plane, but there's 30 coats where they needed 30. And like I've been thinking, tip weight box, you can put 100 coats of dope on this, who cares? Just less lead inside. Now remember that selective thing. Selective right up where the stripes are, but nothing else. Only in the spot where we need it. Little touch-up spot that we had, I really wanted to feather that in. But I don't want clear anyplace else. And of course I want a little up there. I don't want any. Selective finishing. Sounds so complicated, but it really isn't. Put an extra coat on this and you don't really care what that weighs. When I do the fuselages, probably in the next session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use water on the carbon one and M600 on the wood one. I don't like to get water anywhere near wood, and certainly on the wing, that's going to be all M600. And that'll be on our next session. If you have a small plane, a profile or whatever, it's worth doing selective finishing. It's worth putting less weight into the paint and more work into the more weight into the structure. I think in the long run, no matter how you build a model or which model you build, it's a valid way to look at finishing. Today we start the day off feeding the birds. They're all here to keep me company. And as soon as breakfast is over, we're going to get down there and try to finish the fuselages today. See, what I try to do is every day I try to pick something, one little area, and do it to completion rather than start 9 things and not get any of them done. And watching the birds in the morning always gives me a little inspiration. Or if I could only teach them how to buff paint, I'd give them all the seeds they want. Another secret, if you want to be the king of buffing clear, you gotta have pizza. Ooh, that smells good. You gotta have pizza for breakfast. There's something about having pizza for breakfast, watching the birds, and having a big cup of coffee. I don't know. The buffing always goes a lot easier. Okay, it's time to have a breakfast of champions and get these guys sanded out. Now, if you're lacking a little energy or inspiration on your sand out, buff out, we're looking at trying to get 2 fuselages done in one way. Here's the best way I know of to start. Have a healthy breakfast. Don't eat anything fattening. Drink lots of coffee. And watch lots of Skyfire videos, and you'll find it goes in nothing flat. Ready to go to work. Important part of this wooden fuselage that I want to be real careful of. I don't want to gushy it up. What does the word gushy mean? I don't want to get the canopy. I just love that you can't feel that. We've worked hard to keep that edge invisible. And this is the final thing. And if we go through, obviously we can touch it up. But the first thing, anytime you do a canopy, is 1200 only. Get it nice and dull. It takes a few minutes to get through the first couple of coats of clear and get through the orange peel. I want to get the edges just perfect. Now I can see I'm hitting the ink already because there's a high spot there. So when I see I'm going to hit ink, I don't want the ink staining the paint around it. I want to wipe it up as soon as possible. You can see some of it's on there. Anytime you hit ink, you know there's going to be a touch-up on this. So now that we know there's a touch-up, well, let's not worry about it. We know we have to touch up that ink line. But when this is over, now see, as soon as that gets black like that, you know you're in ink or paint or something. But that's about all it's going to take to smooth that out. And one more coat of clear drying on that for a few days. Now you cannot feel where one ends and one begins, and that's what we're striving for. And that dullness in the canopy, that's what you need to get the next coat to bond. Working around the letrosets, the same thing. I hope I don't go through, but if I go through and see a little piece disappearing or a rivet, I'll do that selective touch-up. But I want to get the whole thing dull, and because this is the wood one, again, I have to deal with using the M600. And what I've done is, you see where my fingers are? Now I've moved my fingers down because I'm using a new part of the sandpaper. The newer the paint is, the shorter of a lifespan that sandpaper is going to have. Now I've moved my fingers down a little bit more. I wouldn't want to risk 600 here because then for sure I'd have the risk that I'm going to put scratches in here that are going to come through in a final coat. Trying not to do that. Now you can see how flat. Let's see if we can candle it. It's shiny, but as you get into where it is, that's perfect. Now another thing too, when you have wood parts, you tend to have little ripples where the letrosets are. And this one, I know I had some in here, I just can't find them right now. I guess these are okay. But the point is, if you do have those low spots, a couple extra coats of clear before you sand it out. Again, selectively, don't coat the whole thing. Say you had a low spot here, just coat that 3 or 4 times. Areas that I've really become very happy with. The aeropoxy fillets on this are, for all purposes, perfect right now. We obviously haven't taken it out in the Anaheim sun or anything, but a lot of times if you're going to experience blistering or bubbling, it would already have started. So far that looks pretty solid though. Now the trick again is anytime you see you're going through and hitting ink, you know you've got to kind of back off. But we're looking for that final thin amount of clear. It'll look at how close those fillets. Now up in this nose section, this is one area where I really I'm going to take my time detailing this out. There's so many little angles and edges up here. And there's just no, not that I know of, no quick way to just zip right through this. It just isn't going to happen. And I've kind of resigned myself to the fact I'm only going to get one of these done today. And a lot of times that's what you have to do, is you start out the day thinking, oh, I'll get both of them done, yeah. And halfway through, you know, President Nixon's on a phone or something. And what happens is you really only get part of what you originally thought you'd get done. But again, around these valve covers, they're very delicate. Of course, they're thin composite. And I always refer to this as the wood fuselage. It's really the hybrid fuselage. It's about a third carbon when you count the bottom blocks, the cowls, the canopies. No, this one has this part here too. This one doesn't have a carbon canopy. It's got a... Oh, see, I even forget what the hell I'm doing. Too much sand in the last couple days. Anyway, this is just one of the jobs that I always think, oh yeah, this will be no problem. I'll get it done in one day. And every time I do, see, there's always, every time I candle this, I find another little spot. You can see right down the edge there, some little spot that I want to get. And it's such a focal point, all these little things that are happening up by the nose. And once that spinner is all polished like a piece of chrome, anyway, the fillets really came out nice. The canopy. Now, it doesn't look like I'm going to get both done in one day here, but at least having one done, I'll do the touch-ups on it off camera, and tomorrow we're going to get down here, get that other one done. Now today, one of the little goals I have, these are all the spots that I touched up with the clear, and they've dried 24 hours. I need to go back over that, blend that in, and anytime I have left over at the end of the session, I want to start working on the open bay lettering, because that's areas where you almost always go through. You need to touch up and go back over, and I've wanted that to have a little bit extra time to dry. And once we get this dulled out, it should be, and this isn't done yet, but I just want to see how far it's coming. There you can see we're not there yet. See, this is what we're looking for, is to have it flat like that. You need to dry it and look to see how close. See, we still have some pits. And because it's a carbon part, we can use water safely. And these are the spots that we've already buffed through, so we know there's a tendency to buff through there. It's a high spot. But even if you see how much goes into this once, all these little touch-ups, it seems like, oh man, this is such a pain in the neck. Then at the end, you put the plane on a scale and you say, oh gee, saved a few ounces. And boy, the ounces are always behind the CG, always someplace where significant. Any place that has striping like that, you know there's going to be a spot when somebody rubs their hand over it, you want it to totally disappear. And that to me is the real test, when you can rub your hand over the paint joints and at the same time not have 25 coats of clear on a plane, or big thick glocky coats. It's that very thin lacquery look that I like anyway. possibility when we're sanding, because we are in some real thin areas here, that we'll go through again. Well, if we do, we have choices. We always have the touch-up kit, and we have the colored paint in the gun at all times, so I'm not tempted to just, nobody will see that. I always try to get it as good as I possibly can, and get it as thin as I possibly can. And it's the thin that's hard, because if it didn't matter what a plane weighed, if you could paint an airplane the way you paint a car or a boat, every plane in the world would be perfect. You could just put on 5-10 coats of primer, sand the primer out. You know, if it didn't matter what it weighed, wow, this would be so easy, it'd be ridiculous. What's difficult is you got to make it thin, and it's the thin that makes it hard. Making it light, getting into that 7-8 ounce range instead of the 10 to 12 ounce range. Those ounces are very difficult to get, but once you have them, the planes don't come out tail heavy, they don't need nose weight. I don't even remember the last plane I had that needed nose weight, because of that paint behind the CG just seems to be a killer. Now this plane, because it's a take-apart plane, I'd have one option I don't normally have. I could just make a lighter tail or make something else. But, okay. It's all these little touch-ups that when they're done, you just don't have that decoupage look too, that look that everything is so thick. Now, one of the areas I always have to be very careful, whenever a stripe wraps around the edge, what happens when the appearance point of plane, they'll usually rub their hand there. So you want that, even though you don't go through, you want to have that as nice as, oh, I do anyway, nice as possible. But all these little things now, today what I'm going to try to do is the cockpits, the canopies, all the little touch-up areas, because once I start the wing, I want to go into the wing. I'm going to try to do the wing in either one or two, well, I always say one or two, but it usually takes 3 sessions. But once I start the wing, that really gets me motivated, because then I know that's the last piece, and once that's done, I know I'll be ready to buff. And what's happening little by little, the weather's getting nicer and nicer, and of course we want to get, hopefully get this all in one piece and get some test flights on it. The thing, I always, if you break through on an edge, this is usually where it is. So now what I try to do is I try to stay away from that last 1/64 of an inch. I try to go right up to it, but not over it, because I know there's only one layer of red paint and maybe 1 or 2 layers of clear there. So I don't want to get too carried away. I don't want to buff through again, and if I do, of course, it's right back to the drawing board and redo it. I see, I can already see, there's the tip-off that we're really getting close. So maybe I'm going to have to live with, that'll be okay. You won't see that. Just that last little bit, I don't want to take the paint off. One of the spots, again, there's key spots that I've been trying to get really perfect. And we might not even use this fuselage, but there's no reason. One of the choices I would have in the future, if I really like the way this plane flies, is just build me another wing. Or in the case of, it's my understanding, Dave has the carbon fiber wing mold started, and you know we're going to be making carbon fiber wings before this year's out. That's coming. So I may make a carbon fiber wing for the wooden fuselage. And then I'd have 2 separate planes with relatively interchangeable parts. And one of them, of course, would be to put the carbon fiber wing on the carbon fiber body, the wood wing on the wood body. I'm not getting too aggressive on the canopy, because I know, see the way that, when you see that turning black, you know you're either hitting some ink, and I am. I'm going to have to go in, touch up that ink, and shoot this with another coat of clear. But that's the reason for doing it, is so when you put your hand on it, you can't even feel it. And this is the part, I mean, a lot of people don't even care about this. But the few that do usually wind up in the front row or somewhere near. Now, I know Danny Banjock had some trouble with the paint sticking to his canopy, and what he did, he didn't sand the canopy a little bit before he painted it. Now, sometimes just hitting it with 1200 and getting it rough like that will ensure that the dope will stick. Yeah, we're going to need one more coat. I need to touch up back there. I'm looking around. But that's the whole point here. If you pick that up off the videos, you can do these little touch-ups endlessly. There's no reason to recoat the whole plane. In this case, we just want to recoat that ink line. And now for the job we always leave to last, and with good reason. It's a pain. Anyway, the objective here is I'm going to do the bays first, because if they do need touch-up, they can, the touch-up on the cap strip, you can see how thin the amount of clear we have on there. And also, you know for sure somewhere in this we're going to go through the lettering one way or another. And I'm just looking it over now to see for anything that might want to be touched up. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. But this is one of the things that I don't try to rush. I don't try to do this, and I know I'm not going to get this done in one session. So I'll say, well, in this case, I'm going to do the bottom first. If I get the whole bottom done in one day, fine. You find out if you try to rush the whole thing in one day, you kind of I do anyway, compromise the quality. And this is a time-consuming part of the job. I've found in doing my touch-ups, the 2000 grit, and this is 2000 grit, remember that, the 2000 grit sanding sponge is a little rough if you're not going to recoat. Now, I'm hoping I'm not going to recoat here. What I'm hoping is that once I sand this out, the next step will be touching up minor areas and then buffing it out. But even after buffing it out, there's going to be little spots. And see that, I keep saying it over and over again, but that's how some people get lost in just blowing on 3, 4, 5 coats of clear. Who knows how much they decoupage the plane. And it doesn't even look pretty. It starts to get big and thick, and that's when you usually have problems with fillets. You have problems with other things that just look, I don't know. Getting that thin, stretched out finish is, I don't know, that really is something I appreciate anyway. But anyway, if you're not going to recoat with clear, I would say forget this and strictly go. Now what I did, I have some 1500 sandpaper and some 1200. Now I do this test all the time. A lot of times the 1500 will cut, but there's only one way to know. And I'll always wind up doing the bottom first. One bay at a time. There's no way to rush this. Now steel wool, if you're very, very careful, and it's my understanding some people have that real light touch, because I'm such a big, tough lumberjack kind of a guy, every time I've tried to use steel wool, I wind up with those microscopic scratches, and I've not been willing to live with the scratches. Now I'm sure other people have other tricks there, you know, that we're not privy to, but steel wool, if it's something you want to try, this would be a good time to try it on the bottom. Now I want to get a feel for myself. Is the 1500 is going to cut nice. First off, nothing's coming out on the sandpaper, so that's a good, because we have more clear on the wing than any other place. The thickest finish is right here on the wing. We've gone over the lettering more than any other part of the wing, and we're still probably going to go through. Okay, that looks like it did a pretty good job of cutting through. Now I'll try the 1200 on one bay. That was 1500. And then I'll make a decision. Do I want to do this with 12 or 15? That's the thing with the 2000 grit sanding sponge. It really works great as long as you're going to cover it with a coat of clear. But it just has... See, the grits are like shoe sizes. That's the problem. You go to buy a pair of shoes in one store and a pair of 7s fit you, and you go to another store and 7s don't fit you. Oh, that's kind of... Anyway, I need to get each bay done. And there's a lot of bays, and especially when you're doing an I-beam plane. This is the part of it that you think, oh my God, is this ever going to end? I remember doing that Spitfire. Now some people, let me just look at this up close. Some people really prefer, now see, this is not done enough. Both of these have to be done even more, and I'll show you why. So it looks like the 1500 isn't really cutting as fast as I'd like. And I want these to be perfectly flat. So this is going to be a little more labor intensive, and it looks like the 1200 is going to be the material of choice. 1200 and the M600, the sanding fluid. I'd mention another little thing as I get into this. I'm trying not to leave out any little tricks that I've found, and this is one of them. I start with a little square of sandpaper. I always cut the squares ahead of time, so I have a bunch of them. I don't want to stop in the middle of this. And then what I'll do is I'll work one bay. Now, sooner or later, when you use an M600, you'll feel that it kind of just gets a little dull. 1200 gets dull very quickly. You got to be prepared to, you know, do something quickly. Either use a whole new sheet. But anyway, this is a really good trick. Now I'll get to about this point, and I'll feel all of a sudden the sandpaper's starting to get a little dull. Well, you can feel it with your finger that it's the dull part. Just tear off, especially on an open bay, because you can't press. Give it another little shot of M600. Now all of a sudden you can hear it, in fact, that it's cutting better. Especially on an I-beamer or on a plane with like this with rib caps. I'm trying to avoid the edges, get up in the corners. If you have a geo wing, a bob hunt wing, you got to be real careful getting up in the corners. And old Drindak is finding that out the hard way too, that it's all of these corners, doesn't matter what kind of a wing it is, a corner is a place you have to kind of work in carefully. And again, the reason we're doing the lettering first is because I suspect I'll have the most touch-ups on the lettering and almost none up here on solid wood. So if we, at the end of today's session, if I need to touch up the lettering, it can be drying. And even if I wanted to let this touch-ups dry an extra day, I can be buffing the other parts. And again, this is one of the areas that I think, like a take-apart plane, you really do save a lot of time right now. This is amazing when you have the whole plane in one piece. It's as clumsy as can be working on certain parts of it. This is just so easy. Now I have a finishing friend. A lot of people that have asked me why I don't use a finishing friend. Well, the reason is in this shop there just isn't enough room. When we get the garage finished and Mike's still out there hammering away, trying not to fall off the roof, I have a feeling we'll be able to set up our finishing friend out there. Now see, I've used almost every piece of the sandpaper, and of course at the end, just reverse it. So I've not wasted a whole lot of material in doing this. Every once in a while I get about that far into it and I absolutely have to take a break. I guess I'm a wimp. And believe me, there really is a sign of relief when you get to at least having half of it done. I would say this is half of one side. And the only problem is, if you could do a magic trick and turn around and the other side would be done. But what I want to do, I want to sand all the bays. I want to get all the bays. Again, the reason for doing all the bays first is because I anticipate there would be. Now, amazingly enough, that there were no sand throughs on this side. So maybe I'm learning here. Who knows? But if I did have a sand through, the reason for doing the bays first again, so that if you need to do a little repair, that can be drying, and while it's drying, I could be buffing out other parts. I don't lose any time. Gonna see how much energy I really have tonight or today. Oh man. Once you get half of it done, it seems like the second half goes a little quicker, but boy, that first half.
Back over the third, now onto the fourth.
Now, as I wanted to try to do is minimize the amount of touch-ups I had to do. Of course, there's always a few when you're trying to keep the paint this thin. But notice from here, I haven't sanded this yet, but I've only put the clear, and I'll put about 3 coats on this. Well, maybe one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one tonight. only over the lettering. And that's another way of keeping the weight down, and only over the little letter sets, only over the areas that really need it. So it's that whole thing that we try to work on this video of selective finishing, of not having the whole thing have 50 coats of paint. It's a very selective thing. And I think if you get that, see, another thing you could do if you were not as concerned about going through as I am, because again, this surface goes up and down. If this were a foam wing, say, well, yeah, you could get in here with that William Nomura little airbrush and just go around these letters 4 or 5, 6 times. I haven't been able to do that because the shape of the cap strips, and again, like an I-beam plane or whatever, there's a trade-off to everything like that in life. There's just certainly, for this kind of lettering, I'm just going to have to live with the fact that it is labor intensive. Now, I'll put this aside to dry. We're at the end of a very long, tedious, boring session here. But that's one of the best tricks. 3 coats will dry at least overnight, and even better if I let it dry a couple of extra days. And then what I'll do is sand the perimeter and the lettering, go over the whole thing with the M600, and this should be ready to buff out. But that is just having that selective finishing concept. That is one way to shave a minimum of an ounce. Here, I've gone over this area 2 or 3 times already because I want to have extra clear over the letters for the final sand out. I'm really getting where I'm nervous about going through that gold. Once you hit that gold, that can really be a problem. Now, so the first thing I'm going to do, and this is a good way to plan out the day, is I want to sand these bays, and I still have to sand all the areas around them, because then what I'll have the choice of doing is at the end of the day, if I go through in any spots, I can do the touch-up and put some more clear on top of it. But it's always good, anytime you have those kind of high-definition lettering, you know you're going to have a high-risk chance of going through. The bottom is all done. Boy, I'll tell you, we're closing in on this. I'm real excited about having this done. Maybe even done within this session or 2. And one of the things I'm always tempted to just say, nobody will see that, and just go on to the next step. Now with this lettering, every time I've gone through or had a little problem, I've been able to touch it up and just go recoat it with clear. And this is one area where the Brodak dope is light years ahead of anything else in the fact that it dries in a relatively quick time. Now, other products, when you recoat them, you let them sit for 6 weeks. This, a few days up by the heating vent, and this is we're ready to do what I call another touch-up anyway. Again, because we're trying to see if we can really do a full-size stunner with just a little over a quart of this clear. And I don't mean there'd be easy ways to cheat the system. Don't make a lot of paint lines. Don't make a lot of lettering. Yeah, no, I don't want to do that either. What I want to see is if at the end of this I don't have any unobjectionable buff throughs, which so far the buff throughs have been well within the range that I find acceptable, and they'll all get touched up before we're actually finished. And actually, what I usually do too is a week or so before you leave for the Nats, clean the whole plane off with M600 and walk around with a little touch-up kit or a little spray of clear here and there where maybe you've gone through. There's no way in flying up at our club field and with the baby gorillas that we have as launchmen, there's no way I can never keep a plane ding-free forever, that's for sure. I don't even give that thought an option. But I do try that week before the Nats to get as much of the touch-up done as I can, and I always bring the touch-up kit to the Nats. But when you have these touch-up spots, they sand out relatively quickly. You can see that just blended right in. And as soon as I do all the bays, then we're going to start on the hardwood parts. These go relatively quickly, the leading edge, this part here. And then I hope within a day or 2, we're going to start that magic, where this just turns into a buffed out painted surface. The next step on this is going to be hopefully, to get all the parts together and buff them out. And I want to close out this tape with a little bit of footage, a couple of minutes of footage that show the real Miss Ashley and Gary Levitz when he was alive, from the 1997 Skyfire Reno Air Race video. I think it's footage that pretty much tells the story of Miss Ashley better than I can. Anybody that has a love of Reno Air Races, pick up a set of these Skyfire videos. These are absolutely the best videos if you like Reno Air Races. Here's a little outtake. Thanks for joining us, and on the next video we're going to buff this guy out. We're ready, everything's sanded, we're ready to buff away.
Championship Reno Air Races. You're about to witness the excitement, the color, and the fun side of aviation. This is where big boys and their toys come to find out who's got the fastest airplane on the planet. Extraordinary? How about fast? Do you like smooth lines? No, not those kind of lines. The airplanes. You'll see aerobatics, military aircraft, new unlimited racers, and the pilots who make them fly, plus all classes of pylon racing. So turn up the sound as Skyfire takes you racing in Reno. Perhaps the most exciting part of this event is the pits, where you can walk around and see all the aircraft up close. The pilots? Oh, they're right there for you to meet. Just like dirt, they weren't making these aircraft anymore, so you best have deep pockets if you were going to play this game. If you like the sound of big bore engines, nothing could compare with the sound of all those pistons and valves cranking over and then exploding to life. Not all the aircraft on the ramp originated during World War II. The Formula One class had special kit-built racing airplanes with specific engine displacement. Bruce, these pilots were playing chicken with some pretty tough customers. Now here was the most exciting new airplane in the unlimited class. Race veteran Gary Levitz had sold his old red Mustang, Miss Ashley, and hadn't been racing in Reno for a couple of years. Know what he was doing? He was hiding in the bushes in the suburbs of Seattle building this incredible new aircraft.
Skyfire! All right!
Gary, how are you?
Wonderful.
What's this behind you? How many propellers does it have?
It's a P-38. It's got two propellers. They're counter-rotating.
And so there's two engines driving those two propellers?
No, it's 6 cylinders on each side drives each propeller.
Excellent.
It was actually a special deal that we invented.
How
Just
long
for
did it
you
take
guys.
How long did it take you to come up with that idea?
All my life. How long did it take to come up with this deal here? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Do you like that?
Ooh. You see that? Tonight's the night.
Miss Ashley, too, had a Learjet Wing off John Dilley's old Vendetta airplane. It had Aerostar struts, Piper Cheyenne shock and wheel mounts, Gulfstream nose wheel tires. Radiator and scoop was off Wiley Sanders' Georgia May. The tail was off an H-model Mustang from Don Whittington. The horizontal and trim tab were Learjet. The gear doors and wingtips were graphite. The cowling was made in England, and the power plant was a stock, yes, stock, right out of the box Rolls-Royce Griffin with counter-rotating props. What a great piece of work.
It left Seattle last Friday to come on down here. That's the first real flying it's done. Skip flew it. a few hours up there just around circles around the airport, but really didn't have a chance to work it out. I brought it down from Seattle to Eugene, Oregon, and Eugene, Oregon to here, and it's had the most flying on it in Reno that's had its entire life. Like I say, the airplane's only a week old.
Now, where was this built? Where did you build
Seattle.
it at? In Seattle.
Actually at Payne Field, which is the Boeing 777 completion center. And we had a lot of help up there, a lot of volunteers. And Seattle's a great place to build an airplane.
Sure is.
Yeah, there's nothing you can't get done in Seattle. And if you go to some place and say, I want you to build me one of these that does this and goes like that, they don't look at you like you're crazy. They go,
How many?
about a week. The engine is just step one. You know, it's a box stock engine, no tricks, no nothing. It came out of England a year ago. It was overhauled in 1991 by Rolls-Royce, probably for the South African government, and they never took it or weren't allowed to take it. And it's not trick. It's just a plain stocker like you find in the shackles.
Really? I mean, you haven't really done
Nothing.
much?
I put car spark plugs in it.
Really?
That's it. It's box stock.
You're not kidding.
I'm the box stock, right out of the shackles. And there's another one just like it in the trailer. And they're cheap.
Made its debut in Reno. It was very impressive for a kit-built aircraft. Dan Denny told us all about it.
It's a kit plane, two-place tandem kit plane, full dual controls. It's built with carbon fiber and honeycomb material. The engine is a Falconer 640 horse, 600 cubic inch V12, which is a limited production engine built in Salinas, California. And the airplane is all composite carbon fiber and honeycomb material, and it goes together quite rapidly. It's not a very sophisticated airplane to build because we build in tooling, joggles, and marks that makes it easier for the builder to put together.
It's made it into the gold with a stock engine.
Well, gentlemen, you're looking good. Gentlemen, you got a race.
Hey, he says you got a race, and here they come. All right, back over your right shoulder. Here they come into view. Boy, what a great looking field of airplanes. Oh, man. Boy, do they look good. Wow. Here we go. And number 7, Strega, takes off out in the lead with number 77, Rare Bear. And Brian Sanders going by, looks like he may be trying to pull up, even with the Rare Bear.
Hello here, Rhino, not much. Okay. Down on to Howard now.
Here he is, number 7, Strega, and a Rare Bear.
Closer to the deadline,
Redmond.
Rhino. I'll leave your room.
Here's leading up high, and here's Miss Ashley, Gary Levitz, and Danny Martin. Very high, Ryan Style, Howard Pardue, and Lloyd
You have the
Hamilton.
lead, Rhino. I've got you. You have the lead.
Bringing up last place in that number 76 Hawker Sea Fury. Taking him on the backside of the course now. The front 3 airplanes getting very strung out now. So it's just like I called it off. And we had a first lap speed of 493.665.
All right, you got me?
Yeah, we'll see what that second lap is going to be. It'll probably be a little bit lower due to the fact that they are diving onto the course and where they enter the course. Okay, Miss Ashley just made a move. Looks like in fourth place. And it's number 7, the Strega. And the Rare Bear. Lyle Shelton, the Rare Bear, Brian Sanders, and Dreadnought. Hey, the Cottonwood Lodge Special out there in third. Miss Ashley now in a strong fourth. And Ryan's Child in number 45 in fifth. Dan Martin in number 20, Ridge Runner, sixth. And in seventh place, Howard Pardue. Eighth place, Lloyd Hamilton. And ninth place, Matt Jackson. Oh, Lloyd Hamilton got his own smoke machine up there. Okay, then it's number 7, Tiger DeStefani, followed by the Rare Bear in 77, Brian Sanders in number 8, Gary Levinson number 38, Bill Reinschild in number 45, and Lloyd Hamilton in 62 miles an hour. They're pushing on him hard. Oh, sounding good. Well, is the Bear ready to get that light this time? And Dreadnought, race 8. And number 7 just going away. Well, he's pushing hard on that Rolls-Royce Merlin that's been prepared by Dwight Thorne, the magician with the Merlins. Here's Gary Levitz, Bill Reinschild, third place at 459, and Hamilton now goes ahead of Roadrunner. Lloyd Hamilton up there. It looks like Hamilton now sitting in 6th place. No, 5th place. So it's still